A really fun show planned today on this Wednesday. Welcome, everyone, to the Media Row podcast with me, Justin Miller. Of course, sponsored by Stevens Automotive and Sales and Kelly's Little Nipper. Make sure to go check out those two great spots and tell them that Media Row sent you. But last week was kind of weird. You know, some shows we had interviews, some we didn't. Sometimes you were just left alone with me. This week, we're back to doing the interviews. Huge thanks to Rena Garcia on Monday. And today we're staying with the interviews, but still now moving into what is happening in the sports world as it is game one of the Stanley Cup Finals. I am someone who I love watching playoff hockey. Playoff hockey is really fun, but I'm not a diehard hockey fan. I enjoy going to the games, the Iowa Wild games. My favorite team growing up were the Sharks because my dad somehow had a Sharks jersey. I think he just liked the logo. I loved the logo whenever I'd play games with my friends. So that's kind of my team. But again, I don't know much about hockey. Today we're going to learn some hockey because someone who was a mentor, as early on as I could think of at the radio station, was the former voice of the Iowa Wild, now the voice of the Minnesota Wild, to help us break down the Stanley Cup Finals, talk about his career, and talk about the Wild as well, as that is Des Moines centralized too, is Joe O'Donnell. I was his producer for a handful of Iowa Wild games, and super gracious of him because he's been running around all day today. And he's been able to find time in his busy schedule to be able to hop on the show. So Joe O'Donnell will be joining us here shortly. But before we get to that interview, need to give a shout out to Kelly's Little Nipper at 1701 East Grand Avenue in Des Moines. Make sure to check out Kelly's Little Nipper because, one, it's historic. If you haven't been, you have to go. Tonight's a great opportunity. Wednesdays, trivia night. Go in, have some fun with Kelly's Little Nipper, and it is a great atmosphere. They have great food, great drinks. It is so fun. I'm still getting DMs from listeners who have gone, and now they're like, whenever they come back to Des Moines, they're telling me when they're going to hit up Kelly's Little Nipper because the food is so good. They make great drinks. Friday nights, they have live music. Weekends, they have live music. It is a great atmosphere, great people over there at Kelly's Little Nipper, 1701 East Grand Avenue in Des Moines. We have some bigger news that involves Kelly's Little Nipper. That will be for next week, though, so keep your ears open for that. But go check out Kelly's Little Nipper, 1701 East Grand Avenue in Des Moines. When you go to the historic Kelly's Little Nipper, make sure to let them know that Media Row sent you. So, Joe, I started producing you at KXNO when you were doing the Iowa Wild games. And now, how long have you been with the Minnesota Wild?
So I just finished my third season doing every game, fourth year doing most of the games. So after that second COVID season, so the 2021 COVID shortened season, the one that began in January, that following year is pretty much when I made the transition, stopped doing Iowa Wild games, still under house in Des Moines or in Waukee, and family was still there, but I was back and forth a lot and did the majority of the Minnesota Wild games that season. And now the last 3 years, including the one that just wrapped up, doing every game on KFAN and the Minnesota Wild Radio Network. So it's been awesome, to say the least.
What's that phone call like? Because I'm sure every sports broadcaster, every student that goes to college to try to become a sports broadcaster daydreams about that phone call. What was it like for you?
Yeah, it's pretty thrilling. My situation is a little different because I had done some games with the Wild. Bob Kurtz, the longtime Minnesota Wild radio broadcaster, I think he did the first 20 seasons of Wild hockey and had really a somewhat legendary career before that, right? He did Red Sox games, he did work with the North Stars, he had done Michigan State stuff. So um, he was kind of winding down his career, and the Wild knew that. I think most of the fans probably recognized that as well. And so I kind of had some almost like live auditions, right? I got 4 games one season. Some other folks got games as well. They were kind of mixing in some different voices to see how that went. Then I started to get I think I got 12 games in next year. Most of them were off the monitor because of the COVID season. So by the time it came around, like, hey, we want you to do all the road games, and then eventually, hey, you're the guy. Bob is stepping down. Like, I kind of knew I was on the right path, but still, the first time you hear from whoever it is, that hey, you've earned this opportunity, or we want to give you this chance, and it's certainly rewarding. It was a really special moment in my career. Still remember it very clearly, but there were kind of a few different stepping stones along the way. Like, all right, got my first NHL game. That's awesome, right? And then it's like, all right, they want you to do a few more games next year. Like, awesome. So like, I kind of knew I was on the right path. Obviously, I had to keep doing a good job and keep working at it and take nothing for granted. There was no absolute guarantee, but to answer your question, yes, when you finally achieve your goal in anything in life, really, like, it's certainly rewarding. And for me in particular, having spent so much time in the minors and having this as my goal for a really long time to reach the NHL and do games on radio, I mean, that was kind of my focus. It's pretty cool.
So, what was it like growing up? Was hockey a huge part of your family? Was it always on TV? Because are you from Iowa? I actually don't know that part about you.
So I'm from outside of Philadelphia originally.
Okay.
My dad is a hockey fan. He was a Broad Street Bullies Flyers fan growing up, so he really introduced me to the game. I didn't play ice hockey until I got to about seventh grade. Before that, it was all roller hockey or just going to games or watching games on TV, listening on the radio. So I was always a hockey fan. Watched a ton of it, even before I played. But yeah, it's just been sort of I'm just a sports guy in general, honestly. But for some reason, I really can't answer why. Like, I was like, I want to call hockey games.
And
I was
that's
certain.
some of the hardest too, because I remember I never listened to hockey, and then I one day Andrew Downs was like, "Hey, you gotta go in Saturday night, produce this Iowa Wild game." All right, sit down and listening to you the whole time, like mad respect for any hockey announcer. Like that is the details you guys are able to put in, and I mean, a fast paced, action packed event like hockey is. It's really cool.
Well, I appreciate that. I would say a couple things. One, I was obviously influenced, even if I wasn't super cognizant of it, of obviously broadcasters I'd been listening to, and um, you know, kind of growing up respecting and in some ways probably wanting to be like, even again if it wasn't front of mind, like hearing a guy going, all right, this is what I want to do, I want to sound like this guy. Like, I don't think there was really ever any of that, but again, big fan of the sport, big fan of watching games, listening to games on the radio. I love sports talk radio. Growing up in a spot like Philadelphia, there's tons of commentary that you can get pretty much any, well, now in today's content world, anywhere, right? But growing up in that environment, um, so certainly influencing all those things. I love Sports Center as a kid, in the '90s. Dan Patrick and Keith Olbermann, and like, it was like must see TV for me. NHL Tonight was a show that I feel like influenced me greatly. It was a nightly NHL show that came on a lot of times on ESPN2 after some of the West Coast TV games were over. So I remember a lot of those moments. But to your point about calling hockey games, like, I would, I'd respectfully disagree. Like, to me, hockey's like all I know. So it's like when people are like, "Oh, it's such a hard sport," the Russian names and all these different players from all these different countries, and it's so fast paced. Like, dude, I tried to do college baseball. It's it was painful. It was so, like, you didn't. I went to the University of Delaware. You didn't get a whole lot of information, right? Um, and some of the sports we called it at University of Delaware hockey was club hockey, so you weren't getting almost any stats, or you're scrapping together rosters sort of last minute. But um, I struggled with baseball. Like, I ball was hit, I thought it was into the outfield, and it was caught by the shortstop. You know what I mean? Like, just the perception, the sound of the metal bat. Like, so for me, hockey just, I don't know, it just came naturally. I don't know that I could fill all that downtime at a baseball game, or working with a spotter at a football game. Like, that would all be foreign to me. Could I fake it? Could I get through it? Could I pick it up more quickly maybe than some guy off the street? I would like to think so because of my broadcasting background, but I've done over 1,000 professional hockey games and zero professional games, if anything else. So, if you're like, hey, go call this college basketball game or go call this NBA game, like it'd be a struggle bus. Whereas, I think, if you found a football broadcaster who's never done hockey, you'd feel the same way. But I just think that the pace of hockey, I've always said, like, a good game calls itself. Somebody's like, oh, great call last night. Like, part of me is like, dude, the game was great. Like, I just try not to screw it up, right? Just paint the picture, be passionate, be objective, be descriptive, and the game will carry you from there.
So you go to the University of Delaware. How do you get to Iowa then? What was the travel like to become the voice of the Iowa Wild for a few years?
So after the University of Delaware, my first hockey job was kind of twofold. One, I was interning for the Reading Royals, which is an ECHL team in Reading, Pennsylvania, about an hour from where I grew up. I'd go work their home games and help out their broadcaster with the press box. And if he did a game on TV, I'd fill in on radio. So I got a little taste of it there. I was also doing some writing at the time, again in hockey, trying to just kind of keep my name out there, try to land a job. In March of 2005, I got a call from my boss in Reading who said that the Idaho Steelheads in Boise, Idaho, another ECHL team, so like a double A team,
Mhm.
the Iowa Heartlanders, essentially equivalent. Um, so this is March of '05. He's like, hey, the Steelheads are looking for a broadcaster. Their broadcaster quit. There's like 20 games left in the season, whatever. So about a week later, I got on an airplane, flew to Boise. I finished that year, which was the 2004-2005 season. I did about the last 15 games or so, and then the playoffs. I was there the next 3 seasons. Took a job then in Houston of the American League, the Houston Aeros, in September of 2008, and was there for 5 years until they relocated to become the Iowa Wild. So I've actually been with the Minnesota Wild organization since 2008. So ended up being basically 3+ years in the ECHL and then about 13 or so in the American Hockey League before getting the job in Minnesota.
So I asked Alex Cohen, who is now working with Marquee with the Chicago Cubs, this question because he was the play-by-play voice with the Iowa Cubs for
Yeah.
a while. And do you know Alec by chance? I
Uh,
mean, another Philly guy.
Yeah. So I know him through a mutual friend who's also in the broadcast world, Dan Weiss, who's with the San Antonio Spurs. He used to be in minor league hockey with the San Antonio Rampage, and I've known him as long as I've been in hockey. He and Alec go back like to childhood camp
Oh
or something like
wow.
that. So at one point when I was in Des Moines, he's like, "Hey," so Alex and I kind of made um, like a little bit of a connection there. Our time in Des Moines. And I did see he's been doing more Cubs stuff. You have to fill me in though. Like, is he full time Cubs now?
Yeah, he's
Chicago
full
Cubs.
time with Marquee. So I think he's calling 28
It's
games for the
awesome.
Chicago. It's great too. Like as a diehard Chicago Cubs fan,
Yeah,
it's so nice turning on Marquee and you'll hear Alex's voice. You're
yeah,
just like,
that's awesome.
kudos to that guy too for
Right.
grinding it out. But
Yeah, and again, he did it the right way, right? Like he put his time in Iowa, which is a great organization. I mean, took our kids to plenty of ball games down there at Principal Park. I mean, just a great setup, well run organization. So awesome for him to have that type of growth within the organization.
the question I asked him is, you go from AAA to now the big leagues. What are the biggest differences that you saw too of you were calling Iowa Wild games and then you finally get to go full time with the NHL and you're calling playoff hockey for a professional hockey team. Just what was the biggest, I don't know, like I'm a big Bull Durham fan. I always think of the scene when they're on the bus and he's like, "Yeah, I was in the show and you had warm showers and you didn't have to wear sandals into the shower, whatever it is. You get white balls for batting practice." What was your big moment of I've made it?
Well, if we're talking from a broadcast perspective, one thing I was interested in my own self to see is like how much I might have to adjust my call because of the speed of the game. Um, Outside of that, and obviously you have to get used real quick to not saying um, you're listening to Wild Hockey on KXNO. When you do
Did you
that
ever
for,
make that mistake?
you know what, like, I don't remember what season it was. I don't think it was this year. It was like, it wasn't right when I got there. It was like, I don't know, say 100 games in or something. Like at one point, I caught myself just out queuing improperly, or starting to want to say kicks and all in my head instead of the minute. You're listening to Wild Hockey. Um, it's one of those things where when you do something so many times, repetition wise, you are a little like, all right, don't forget the power play is not presented by whoever. It's now presented by, you know what I mean? Those types of things. So you're not throwing it back to the KXNO studios anymore. So um, but outside of the broadcast perspective, like the rest of it has changed immensely for me. Like in the minor leagues, and Alex will tell you this too. Like you just have to wear so many hats. And I'm sure you see it with Ben Gisselson now in Iowa, and
Yeah.
um, like that's something that was instilled in me at a very young age, broadcasting wise in my career. When I got to Boise, is like I sold corporate sales for corporate advertising from the time I got into pro hockey until the time I got to from minor league hockey until the time I got to the NHL. I had to help with PR and content. And the last 6 years I was with Iowa, I booked all the team travel and ran all the logistics from meals, the hotels, the flights, the per diem, the buses. If you trade for a player, where's he going to live? Putting him in a hotel until you can get him an apartment until he finds his own place, and
Wow. I didn't know you
furnishing the
did all that
apartments.
too.
Yeah. But most guys do. Like, it wasn't unique to me. It's not unique to Iowa or, the Minnesota Wild organization. Like, that's, if you're working minor league baseball, if you're working minor league hockey, most likely they've got you selling something to bring in revenue, or they have you doing multiple jobs because that's how they justify having you on staff. So it just became part of the thing, part of the job. When I got to Minnesota, like there's none of that. They have people for that. They have resources for that. So part of me just became like almost getting used to not being as important in a lot of ways. Like I call the games, be prepared, show up on time, do your thing, help out with content when asked, go to appearances or charitable events when asked. If they need me to talk to the season ticket holders or moderate a Q&A with the GM, no problem. But like that stuff in Iowa was pretty much every day. Things outside of the game where broadcasting the game at the minor league level is almost secondary, and it was a lot of times to me. Like it would be the last thing that I did. It'd be the last thing I prepared for. It'd be the last thing that I knocked off my list because the other things were more important organizationally, or even in some ways financially. Like if I didn't sell corporate, because I spent my summers working on my demo tape, like that was hurting me commission wise. So that was a huge adjustment. Just like I made it, got to the highest level, but now there's just like way less to do, which is fine. Like that's why you want to get where you want to get. It's like I was in this business to call games, not to sell dasher boards or season tickets, but like that was just a reality of working my way up. So, um, being on the charter flights now, staying in Ritz Carltons instead of Courtyard Marriotts, and going to places like Vegas instead of Rockford, like those are all obviously huge differences in my day to day. But um, a lot of it is just having less, you know, responsibility from a job perspective, and now it's like focus more on the broadcast and enjoy the fact that I've gotten to the highest level.
So I didn't grow up in a hockey family. Like I enjoyed watching hockey, and everyone always talks about playoff hockey is some of the best sporting action you'll get. What is it like to call a playoff NHL game?
Yeah, it's amazing. Um, Frustrated personally that haven't been able to call more than the first round. I feel for the fans and the players, and so many people in the Wild organization have been here much longer than me. That they continue to kind of get turned away, in round one. Um, I was just saying to one of our staff members recently, like I can't wait to experience the conference final, the Stanley Cup final, from a personal broadcast standpoint. Part of me, like, kind of going back what you asked before, is like, I don't know how I'll handle it. Like, it's what everybody dreams of. It's the most pressure-packed moments for the players, the most anxious moments for the fans. From a broadcast standpoint, like I would love those reps to see how you know you have to handle it, right? Like you only get those calls one time. If it's an overtime winner to send the team to the Stanley Cup final, like you don't want to screw that up, right? Like you don't get that again. So, and I haven't been to that spot at the NHL level before. I mean, I called plenty of playoff games in Houston. Unfortunately, Iowa only made the playoffs the one season. Um, but it was like I want that experience to further my career to make me a more polished broadcaster. And again, even though I've been doing this for 20 years, like those moments are different. It's different than a regular season game in November. So um, playoff hockey is the best. It's the most intense. You have such an appreciation for what these guys go through when you see it up close and personal. The media scrutiny and the coverage is just different. Like it's especially at the NHL level. Like every day there's set press conferences and the morning skates are more like scrutinized, and you have the travel, the uncertainty of after game five, is there a game six or is the series over? So those are things that, as many regular season games as you do, or as many seasons you experience, the playoffs, they just feel like a different animal. I think it comes across that way on TV. In person, the games are just, more intense from a fan perspective, and it just means so much more. Every play is magnified. So, especially in the NHL. It just feels like those guys lay it on the line, maybe more than any other sport. Um, yeah, and I love watching from afar, but can't wait to the Wild, have that success and get to experience it personally.
When was the last time you were getting ready to call a game, or just the last time since you've been in Minnesota that you had a pinch me moment?
Just this season, just Marc-Andre Fleury wrapping up his career, getting to be a part of that in some very, very small way. I won't ever forget. Just this year, he goes back to Pittsburgh, plays there one last time, getting to call his final win, getting to call him passing Patrick Waugh for second most wins all time. Not this past season, but the year before.
Yeah.
Just some of those moments because of what a special player and person he is. I think about Kaprizov hitting 100 points 2 years ago or whatever it was. Like that was a cool moment. Just some of the remarkable plays that guy makes every night. Or if a guy hits a certain milestone, you don't want to again screw up that call. But this past year in Montreal with Fleury, who never played for the Canadiens, but he is French Canadian. He grew up in Quebec. The Canadiens were his hometown team essentially. For him to go back there and win that game and shut them out, and to have the crowd cheering his name and the Canadians players stay on the ice after the game and shake his hand, like that was a broadcast slash moment. I work with Tom Reed, who's just an unbelievable person. He's seen every Wild game, literally ever. Um, he played 700 games in the NHL. I have the utmost respect for him, and when he tells you I haven't seen something like that before, with the thousands of games that he's played in, watched, and commentated, and I mean thousands, like that's when you go, okay, this is something that hopefully 3, 4 decades from now, if I'm still around, I'll be thinking about and talking about and remembering well. So, Fleury in particular was a lot of fun to cover because he is a Hall of Famer, and to see him go out this year the way he did with the class he showed and the respect the opponents had for him was pretty cool.
I wanted to have you on also to talk about and preview the Stanley Cup finals. Just what have you seen from these two teams from your time broadcasting, and maybe what should people, both fans that have watched every NHL game and casual fans like me, be aware of with the Stanley Cup finals?
Well, it's going to be a hard-nosed series, so buckle up if this is your first taste of playoff hockey, because these two teams obviously played last year against each other. Um, Panthers jumped out to a 3-0 series lead. Edmonton wins the next three games, and in almost an improbable way, tried to rally and win the Stanley Cup in dramatic fashion. They didn't get it done ultimately in Game 7. Now they have another shot at it. So I think you're going to have some bad blood. You're going to have obviously the history of last year's series between them. You're going to have two teams that play fast. Panthers are an in-your-face team. They're very machine-like. They don't get phased. They don't get thrown off their game. A loss in this series isn't going to change the way they go about their business. As for the Oilers, it's just high-end skill. And with McDavid and Draisaitl, two of the best in the world, you don't want to miss a shift that they're on the ice because they can change the game in a heartbeat. They can make an unbelievable play that will have you kind of stunned that you just witnessed it. But again, the Panthers are they're very unflappable. So you've got the revenge factor. You've got two of the best players in the world in Edmonton. You've got some hard-nosed, scrappy players that love to mix it up in Florida. There's just a lot of really good storylines. So I think it'll be a longer series. I think 6 or 7 games is what everybody should expect. I hope Edmonton wins. Canada hasn't won a Stanley Cup since the Canadiens in 1993, the Montreal Canadiens team back in 93. So it's been 32 years.
Which is crazy to think then a Florida team
right. And lately
year.
We've had the Panthers, we've had Vegas, we've had Tampa.
Yeah.
Those are your recent Stanley Cup champs. So Florida's in the final for the 3rd straight year, which is a really tough thing to do, to play all that hockey year after year and keep getting back there. So I think it should be a great series. I really think it's going to go 6 or 7 games. And ultimately, I think it'll be good for the game if Connor McDavid can win the Stanley Cup. He is the world's best player. He is one of the most notable names for the casual fan. He might not be super marketable being in Edmonton and not being the most outspoken guy, but the numbers he's putting up have him on a trajectory that could land him as one of the greatest ever. So at some point, to cement that legacy, he's got to win it all. I think it'd be really cool if he does this year.
Last question for you, then I'll stop taking so much of your time today.
No, you're good.
Just what can Minnesota Wild fans expect for next season?
Well, it's an exciting time. They have a lot of cap space for the first time in years because of the Zach Parise and Ryan Suter buyouts that had cap penalties, large cap penalties, especially the last couple of seasons. They have some exciting prospects in Liam Ogren, who played a lot in Iowa down the stretch of the season and had great success scoring goals. Danila Yurov is a young Russian player that is coming over to North America for this upcoming season. He's expected to battle for a spot on Minnesota's roster this year. Jesper Wallstedt should be probably fighting for ice time in the crease area with Philip Gustafsson now that Fleury is retired. So you've got 3 young players and a goalie and a couple of forwards that fans should be excited about. And then the cap space is going to be, on July 1st, what does Bill Guerin do? Does he sign a couple of $5 to $6 million players and add kind of more depth in scoring? Or does he go out after a big fish and try and land one of these guys that's going to get 10 plus million a year on a long-term deal and become one of the new faces of the franchise? So they need to add some offense. I think they'll do it this summer. It's exciting because they have the flexibility and the money to go out and make a couple of big splashes. And then with the young players looking to make that next step, and a guy like Kaprizov could also be extended this summer to a long-term deal and basically cement his future in Minnesota for a long, long time. I think there's a lot to look forward to.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for doing this for me, Joe. I know you had so much going on today, but it meant a lot that you were able to find time to join us.
Oh, good, Justin. Great to hear from you, buddy. Thanks for having me, and good luck.
Huge thank you to Joe O'Donnell, the voice of the Minnesota Wild, for really finding a way to hop on the show today. We had family stuff, work stuff. It didn't matter. He was able to find a spot and hop on the show. Really appreciate that. And a really fun show today. It was a fun show on Monday. I had plans for Friday, had an interview set up. Things got switched around, having to now be on our feet, just like Reno was talking about on Monday with TV, radio, podcasts. It's no different. But I don't know what's going to happen Friday. I know we'll have fun, so make sure to tune in. But before we wrap up today, need to give a shout out to our guys over at Stevens Automotive and Sales, 5320 Northwest Beaver Drive in Johnston, Iowa. Family owned and operated for 35 years. They are loyal people. They are people that are going to communicate with you efficiently and make sure you are up to date with your car's news. And then no BS coming out of Johnston from them. They are always going to cut it to you straight, and they're never going to upcharge you unless, you want something extra fixed. They will let you know what needs to be fixed right away, what can wait, and what to just keep an eye on. No BS from Stevens Automotive and Sales. Went there actually today. It's always a welcoming environment, and now I got to get myself in there again for an oil change. So I know it'll be done quick and easy and efficiently, because that's what happens over at Stevens Automotive and Sales. 35 years of family-owned and operated, 5320 Northwest Beaver Drive in Johnston, Iowa. When you go to Stevens, make sure to let them know that Media Row sent you. We had a great time today. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to listen, like, subscribe, comment, rate, all that good stuff. And we will see you Friday for another edition of the Media Row podcast.